It will happen! Not today and not tomorrow, but very soon. I believe it's going to take another 2 or 3 weeks until it really happens, but after this past weekend, it's actually pretty clear that it will happen. There's no hope for Avatar to keep the top spot when it comes down to the worldwide box office. I mean, let's be honest. After Avengers Endgame opened with $1.2 billion globally in only one weekend, everyone was like, this is gonna top Avatar in a record time. It did not happen yet, but what happened is it topped Titanic after its second weekend to become the second highest grossing movie of all time and the first non-James Cameron movie to beat Titanic. A few weeks ago, fans could not believe that Avengers Endgame could possibly fail to beat Avatar, and I can understand that because the question was like, how can it be that a movie that opens with $1.2 billion in its opening weekend, how can it be that this movie fails to beat the $2.788 billion that Avatar made in 2009? Well, the reason is it was very front-loaded, especially in international territories. Avengers Endgame opened with $866 million overseas and it smashed probably all box office records there, but it also dropped down like a rock. In its second weekend, it made about $288 million, then $107 million, $47, and so on. So the drops were always like 50 and sometimes even over 60%. So that's the reason why the box office worldwide slowed down dramatically. So it became more and more unlikely that Avatar would be beaten by Avengers Endgame, but then Disney came around the corner and said, we are going to re-release the movie to beat Avatar. That's not what they said, but probably thought. And that's okay. I mean, it was so close, why would you miss the opportunity to take the crown if you can? So how far away is Avengers Endgame from taking the crown? It's only $7.2 million. Really, it is so close. And Avengers Endgame, don't worry, it will end up above Avatar, but it's going to be a photo finish, and I don't see Avengers Endgame doing much more than $2.79 billion, but that doesn't matter. It will be about 2-3 millions above Avatar, but it will win. And the very unique and funny thing about it is actually that it will be the #1 movie worldwide, but not domestically and not internationally. That sounds very weird, I understand that, but that's just how it will be. When Titanic came out and it became the #1 movie of all time, it was the biggest movie ever domestically and internationally. And so was Avatar when it came out. But now, with Avengers Endgame taking the crown, it's incredibly different because domestically, Star Wars The Force Awakens is still #1 with about $80 million above Avengers Endgame, and internationally there's no way that Avengers Endgame will beat Avatar because Avatar is still about $100 million above Avengers. So how could that be? Well, Star Wars was actually never as big internationally as it was domestically, and so was Star Wars The Force Awakens, even though Harrison Ford and all the others came back for a reunion, or not quite that. However, that's a different story, but after those iconic characters came back to screen, every Star Wars fan was waiting for such a big moment, and that big moment pulled off domestically. Internationally, it did also very great, but it did as good as, a Fast and the Furious movie or Jurassic World. It was not much about that. Domestically, the movie pretty much demolished all movies. So domestically, Star Wars The Force Awakens made almost $200 million more than Avatar, but internationally, Star Wars The Force Awakens made only half of what Avatar made back in 2009. So what does all of that mean? Well, it actually means that soon we're gonna have 3 different winners. Domestically, it's gonna be Star Wars, internationally, Avatar, and worldwide, the big one, is gonna be Avengers Endgame. And what's really impressive here is China, because China is one of the main reasons that Avengers Endgame will be able to take home the title, biggest movie of all time. Because let's be honest, in 2009 when Avatar came out, China was still a little market. It was still a little market for Hollywood movies. Big Hollywood movies made about $30 to $40 million there, and that was it. Because back then, when Avatar came out, Avatar was, released in less than 5,000 theater screens, and Avengers Endgame ended up having over 60,000, so much more. And that makes the $200 million that Avatar earned back then much more impressive. The $600 million that Avengers Endgame pulled in today. That is an incredible number, and it is a record number for Hollywood movies. But in direct comparison with Avatar, it shows that Avatar had only a few theaters and it still was able to do over $200 million there. So that is really, really impressive. So the big question now is, if Avengers Endgame made so much money in China and Avatar only a third of what Avengers made, how can it be that Avatar is still 100 million above Avengers Endgame? There are actually three reasons: Japan, Australia, and Europe. If we take a closer look at the European box office and at Japan and Australia, it's pretty clear that Avengers Endgame never ever had a shot at beating Avatar there, because the numbers that Avatar made there are so huge that it seems almost impossible to get there. And so Avengers Endgame had a phenomenal run in Europe as well. But Avatar is just a whole other level. As you can see on the list, Avatar made about $150 million in the UK and Avengers Endgame 115. Now, Avengers Endgame is not far away from Avatar, but if you take a look at Germany, for example, where Avatar made $162 million, that's almost $100 million more than what Avengers Endgame did. And France is even more impressive. Avatar made $175 million there, and Avengers basically only a third, so $61 million. In Australia, it's 105 against 58. In Russia, there's an even bigger gap with 117 against 45. In Spain, it's almost 70%. It's 109 for Avatar against the 32 of Avengers Endgame. And finally, Japan, where Avengers Endgame made $54 million, which is great, but Avatar made $171 million. So as you can see, Europe and Japan and Australia are the reason why Avengers Endgame will not be able to take down the international box office record from Avatar. For me personally, Avatar's achievement will always be a little bit bigger than Avengers Endgame's achievement, and one of the reasons is because Avatar was an original property, and especially today it's getting harder and harder for original IPs to make money at the box office. And in fact, it had been for the past decades as well, because if you take a closer look at the top 50 worldwide, it's going to be really, really hard to discover a movie that is not a sequel, a remake, or anything else that is based on something. I have to talk about it, even though I know that you don't like to hear it, but inflation is also one of the reasons why Avengers Endgame will beat Avatar. Now, I know that Gone with the Wind will be the real #1 movie if you consider inflation, but that movie came out about 80 years ago, so Avatar came out 10 years ago. That's not a long time if you think about it. Yes, streaming services have become incredibly huge in the past 10 years, but they actually killed DVD and Blu-ray sales and not cinema. Cinema is still church. In fact, if you take a closer look at the top 10 worldwide box office, then you realize that 7 out of 10 movies came out after 2015. So in the past 4 years, the top 10 worldwide have been changed completely. A few years ago, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was still #3. Now it's not even more in the top 10. Now imagine how the box office is going to look in a few years from now. It's going to change the whole time now. And inflation is one of the reasons, because inflation is the only reason why you can report box office records, because if you would go with ticket sales, it will be completely different. And of course, Hollywood wants to have big headlines, and ticket sales don't do that. You have to cheat with inflation. I've also heard people saying that Avatar had basically no competition, but that's not really true. Because if we look back, you can see that Avatar almost lost its top spot to Sherlock Holmes in only its second weekend. And even when Alice in Wonderland came out in March and it opened with over $160 million, even when that movie came around, Avatar still had the best hold in the top 10. And let's not forget that many wanted to be big movies failed at this year's box office, including Men in Black, Pikachu, and also Pets 2. Alright, thanks so much for going over the box office with me. That was it for today. If you'd like to see more box office reports in the future, please like and subscribe, and also tell me in the comments below what you thought about this report, because this is the first YouTube video ever that I shot, and I can only get better, and please forgive me if I sounded weird here and then. I have to tell you that English is not my first language, but I'm trying to become better at it. However, thanks very much, and now leave YouTube because you have to prepare your Marvel celebration party.